beautiful souls. Welcome back to When Julian Speaks. This is a Heart to Heart Monday. So, this is our weekly space where we have honest conversations about love, relationships, healing, self worth, and the emotional experiences of people quietly carry in their hearts. So if you're new here, let me just remind you that this is a voice podcast created for anyone who has ever loved deeply, lost deeply, questioned themselves, started over, healed, grown, and continued moving forward despite of life's challenges. This is a place where we talk honestly about relationships, not the perfect versions we often see online, but the real experiences that shaped who we become, right? So wherever you're listening right now from today, and whether you're driving, walking, working, or relaxing at home, or simply needing a quiet companion for a little while, thank you for joining me. So today's Hot Mondays episode called When You're Ready for Love, but Love Isn't Ready for You. Okay. And if you've ever felt frustrated by your relationship status, and if you ever wondered why everyone around you seems to be finding love while you're still waiting, if you ever questioned whether your time will ever come, then this episode is for you. Because the truth is, there are many people walking around with hearts full of love and no one to give it to. And that can feel incredibly lonely, isn't it? On our first segment, it's called The Question Many People Secretly Asked. Let's start with a question that many people ask themselves, but rarely say out loud. What is wrong with me? It's a painful question, I know. And unfortunately, it's one of many single people wrestle with, especially when they genuinely feel ready for a relationship. So you see friends are getting married, you see engagement announcements, you see couples traveling together, building home together, starting families, and meanwhile you're still waiting for someone who feels right, waiting for some relationship that lasts, waiting for the connection that feels genuine. After a while, it's easy to start wondering if you're somehow behind in life. But there is something I want you to remember. Being single is not evidence that you're unlovable. And being in a relationship is not the evidence that someone has life figured out. So life is not a race, love is not a competition, and your worth is not determined by your relationship status. And this is our next segment we'll run into. So being ready doesn't mean it happens immediately. So one of the hardest realities to accept is that readiness and timing are not always the same thing. You can be emotionally available. You can be healed from the past heartbreak. You can know what you want. You can be willing to invest in a healthy relationship and still not meet the right person immediately. Then that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It just simply means that life doesn't always operate according to our preferred schedule. Think about the other areas of life. Like sometimes we're ready for opportunities before those opportunities arrive, right? And sometimes we prepared before the door opens. Sometimes we are qualified before the position becomes available. So love can be similar, I would say. And while the waiting period can still feel frustrating, it doesn't mean that the waiting is meaningless. Where our next segment is the loneliness nobody talks about. So let's have an honest conversation about loneliness. Because loneliness isn't always about being physically alone. Sometimes loneliness comes from the feeling disconnected. Sometimes it comes from watching others experience something you deeply desire. And one of the most difficult things about loneliness is that people often minimize it. They say things like, just enjoy being single. Love will happen when you least expect it, or everything happens for a reason. While those statements may came from good intentions, they don't always acknowledge the reality of what someone is feeling. Because it's possible to appreciate your independence and still desire companionship. The possible to enjoy your life and still wish you had someone to share it with. Those two things can exist at the same time. Wanting love doesn't make you needy. It makes you human. We are wired for connection. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that. And I want you to take a moment and ask yourself something. Are you waiting for love? Or are you waiting for life to begin? Because there's a difference. Because sometimes people become focused on finding a relationship that they unintentionally put their lives on hold. So they postpone happiness, they postpone dreams, the experiences, and worst thing is that they tell themselves that I'll travel when I have found someone, or if I found someone, I'll be happier when I found someone, or I'll feel complete when when I find someone. But life is happening right now, people, not someday, and not after a relationship begins, right now. And while it's okay to hope for love, it's important not to postpone your entire life while waiting for it. Okay, so the next segment is called The Myth of Being Complete. And one of the most common messages we hear is that another person will complete us. It sounds romantic, isn't it? But it creates unrealistic expectations. The truth is that healthy relationships are not usually built by two incomplete people searching for someone to fix them. They're built by two individuals who bring their whole selves into the relationship. Now, none of us are perfect, right? And we all have the areas where we're growing. We all have wounds we're healing. But a relationship should complement your life, not become your entire identity. And when we expect another person to complete us, we place enormous pressure on the relationship. Pressure no human being can realistically carry. But let's talk about why some people settle. Let's talk about something that happens far too often. After waiting a long time, some people become tired of waiting. And when that happens, they become vulnerable to settling. Not because they're weak, because they're exhausted. They begin lowering the standards they once considered important. They ignore the red flags. They tolerate the behavior they know isn't healthy. And sometimes they convince themselves that an unhealthy relationship is better than being alone. But loneliness inside a relationship can be far more painful than loneliness outside of one. And a relationship is not automatically successful simply because it exists. The quality of the relationships matter. The health of the relationship matters. The respect, trust, the emotional safety matter. Never let your fear of being alone convince you to accept less than what you genuinely need. I know this can be difficult, but trusting the timing of your life, especially when waiting feels endless. But sometimes life is preparing you for something you cannot see. Something, or sometimes growth is happening beneath the surface. And sometimes lessons are being learned, or sometimes healing is still unfolding. And sometimes the right people arrive when both individuals are ready to meet each other in a healthier way. And this doesn't mean we sit back passively. It doesn't mean we have to stop living. It doesn't mean we have to stop meeting people. It just simply means that we stop measuring our value based on whether love has arrived yet. Because your worth existed before the relationship, and it will come to exist regardless of your relationship status. So here's something I've come to believe. Like, building a life you love is the healthiest relationship when, or often happen when, people already have a meaningful relationships with their own lives. They have passions, the purpose, friendships, interests, dreams. And not they're trying to avoid love, but because they've learned that life is bigger than any one relationship. And when love eventually arrives, it becomes an addition to an already fulfilling life, and not the sole source of fulfillment. So while you're waiting, build your life. Go travel, learn, grow, create, reconnect with yourself, invest in friendships, discover new interests. Not because you're giving up on love, because your life deserves your attention too. So maybe you're listening today and you feel forgotten. So I have a message for the person who feels forgotten. Maybe if you're single and much longer than you expected, maybe you experienced disappointment after disappointment, or maybe you watched your relationship begin and end while yours never even seemed to start. You know, if that's you, I want you to hear this. Your story is still unfolding. This chapter of your life is not the entire book. And just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it never will. There are reasons in life where growth happens quietly, without applause, without recognition, without obvious progress. But growth is still happening. And often, we only understand the purpose of those seasons when we look back later. So before we finish today's episode, I want to leave you with a few questions you can ask yourself right now and with me. So first question is, are you living your life fully right now? Or are you waiting for a relationship to give you permission to be happy? What dreams have you postponed? What experiences have you delayed? What parts of yourself deserves attention and care today? And perhaps the most important question, if love arrived tomorrow, would it find you living your life or waiting for your life to begin? Take some time to think about these questions about this week. So for now, I'd like to thank everyone for joining me in for another Heart to Heart Monday here in When Julian Speaks. And I hope today's conversation reminded you that being ready for love and waiting for love are two different things. So while waiting can be difficult, it doesn't mean your life is on hold. It doesn't mean you've become forgotten. And it certainly doesn't mean there is something wrong with you. Your value does not depend on whether someone chooses you. Your value exists already because of who you are. So if today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing this with someone who think may need to hear this. You can also listen on When Julian Speaks on YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And if you'd like to share your own story or anonymous story submission form can be found on our Facebook page and on our Instagram account. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you may also grab a copy of my book. It's called The Space I Never Gave Myself. They are available through Amazon.com and on our website, which is whenjulianspeaks.com.au. So tonight, thank you again for spending time with me. As I always say, take care of your heart, keep growing, keep believing, and remember, your life is happening now, not someday when love arrives. Okay, so this is Julian, and you've been listening to When Julian Speaks. I'll talk to you on the next Heart to Heart Monday.